Welcome to Charts Today. My name's David Linton, and today's edition for Thursday, the 9th of April, comes to you from London. And of course, all eyes still on the Middle East situation. We've got crude oil now ranging between 90 and 110, basically. Those are the numbers to remember. It's a $20 range. We put our report out to energy clients this morning, which we mentioned this range used to be 100, 120. It's now 90, 110, and 100 is going to be a really critical level. And we're sitting at 98 at the moment, both on WTI and Brent crude, very closely aligned at the moment. But 98 is the level, but 100 is going to be really critical. If we see crude oil back above 100, then the headlines come back. So today will be very interesting. But the interesting thing is that there's still uncertainty around this Middle East ceasefire, and that means there's uncertainty in markets generally. Looking at the dollar, and this is really the interesting thing, remembering the time horizon is really important. And what I do recommend, if you haven't already watched it, is go to the LSEG Masterclass in our resources on the updated website and watch the very first one. Watch your time horizon. And here we talk about long-term weekly charts. I mean, long-term, we're thinking months ahead. Medium-term daily charts means we're thinking weeks ahead. And short-term 60-minute charts means we're thinking hours ahead. So the key thing here is that basically we have a long-term chart for the dollar, and you can see here that it is gradually declining. We are below the cloud, so we're in bearish mode. We've got an activated downside target and an unactivated upside target. Looking at the daily chart, we've got a big downside target, a new low below the sort of 95 level would really then push us towards that target. And if we look at the short term, thinking now the 60-minute chart, days ahead, we activated the downside target on the news of this Middle East truce. But the interesting thing is that this has been quite damaging for the US dollar, and a move below 98.50 now would continue that trend to that target. So the fallout so far has been really that the dollar is has fallen on that, more so really than crude oil has risen. Looking at Bitcoin, we've got a new downside target on the 60-minute chart. We are above the cloud there on the 60-minute chart, but on the daily chart, we're below the cloud, and we've got downside targets. So that short-term move is now really quite key. We saw markets yesterday bouncing quite strongly. Nasdaq bouncing really massively, and we'll look at some of the constituents in a minute. But the reality is this downside target hangs over us until we make a new high. Looking at the futures this morning, we're down around 0.5%. The market's starting to question how good news this ceasefire really is. And looking at the UK market, not so badly hit this morning, still above the cloud on the lagging line, heading to that long-term target, looking a lot better still than the US market, and not that far from making a new high. The key thing, of course, is the oil majors in the UK driving that. The DAX in Germany is down more, and we are seeing here that we have got down 1% this morning, even though we've got targets on the medium-term chart to back to the sort of top of the range. But you can see this is much more a sideways trend than we've seen in the UK. Now looking at Asia, Japan, still a big worry, Japan, really. And the interesting thing is we're seeing the stock market with a downside target. If we look at the yen, this 160 level is really critical to watch. And I've talked many times about the Japanese bond market. The key thing here was we were worried in January when that was making new highs. It's making even higher highs now. The Middle East has taken the sort of forefront, but the bond market in Japan is a really big issue, and the Japanese economy has been hit hard by what's been going on in the Middle East, as it relies very heavily on the Middle East for its energy. So Japan is still a key thing to watch. Looking at India, this is China. bit of a mixed picture there. Looking at India, the Sensex bounced strongly yesterday, but still very bearish below the cloud. And the Aussie market really has really improved very dramatically, pushing back towards its all-time high. So that's going to be really significant. We are seeing some quite strong moves in commodities at the moment. We're seeing cocoa that's still bearish below the cloud. Coffee, I did my soft commodities report for corporate clients on Tuesday, and you can see here coffee at risk of breaking to a new low. That's not good news. And sugar has turned a bit of a corner here. The key thing is we put in a higher low, and we are seeing wheat upside target there for wheat and corn. Interesting thing here is that corn has got upside targets as well. The fertilizer situation in the Middle East still a big factor. Gold, this has been a really significant. The fact that we are testing the cloud, we're below on the price, that would be a neutral call. Mechanically, we're in the cloud on one, and that's what we'd have. Looking at the 60-minute chart, we are seeing a gradual uptrend. We need to break that sort of 1480.50 level, so 4,850 level, to activate a new target to 4,250. So 5,255. So the key thing is we need a new high there. Silver, not looking as good. And the interesting thing here, this was all the rage, of course, in January, but it is quite catastrophic, and we are now below the cloud with downside targets. So it's hard to call those higher at the moment. Now, looking at the tech majors in the US, we saw some pretty big moves. Amazon up 3.5%, Meta up 6%, but it doesn't really change the picture of the chart. It's really quite interesting there. And Nvidia also up 2%, but we've been saying for a very long time Nvidia's high was way back in October. The froth has gone despite stellar results, and it will be very interesting to see what the outlook is at their next set of results with everything that's been going on in the world. Now, looking at the Dow, we had some very big performances there yesterday. Some stocks up 6%, really quite significant there. And so we've seen really big moves. And if we look at the NASDAQ, Intel, we're up 11%, pushing Intel to a new high. So that is really significant. That target has been in place, and it's really shrugging off any fears. Micron, the darling, along with Nvidia, not looking anywhere near strong. Sorry, that's Microchip. If we look at Micron, AMD, we can see here, not looking as good, and Micron, we're up 7%, but again, not making new highs like Intel, so really quite significant there. A quick look at the UK market, some big moves again today, 6%. So we're seeing some really big changes here on the market, and that's quite key. But ultimately, we still have some fallers like EasyJet, and still a lot of stocks are not above their clouds, and that's the key thing. Look for stocks that have got upside targets, that are in uptrends and holding support, and that's the really important thing, and that you'll find there are fewer and fewer of them. So really quite key. Burberry up another one this morning. BP up 2.5%, looking pretty strong there. That's it for today. Until tomorrow, happy charting. Bye for now.